Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Senator Todd Pillion, and I am unfortunately not present yet, but I will be within a particular amount of time. I will be there, depending on Interstate 81. So, because I have such a great vice chair, I am now going to kick it over to her and let her chair the meeting so I can value my life on Interstate 81.
All right, thank you, Senator Pillion. We'll go ahead and call this meeting to order. Besides myself being present, we also have OAA Secretary Tim Spencer, Delegate Brianna Sewell, he had to drop off. So we also have Sheriff Joe Barron here, Sharon Buckman, Daryl Washington, Mike Tillum, and our newest board member, Ms. Debbie Ritter, and we also have Assistant Secretary Craig Martha, representing the Secretary of Health and Human Resources, Janet Kelly here. And we do have an established quorum. At this time, I'd like to ask all the staff and any visitors to introduce themselves. Kara, would you like to start?
Sure, I'm Kara Moisan, I'm the business manager for the OAA.
I'm Matt Terrell, I'm a business analyst for the OAA.
Matthew Gray, one of the regional abatement coordinators. Jenny Sawyer, I'm the Eastern Region abatement coordinator.
Tony McDowell, I'm the executive director.
Charlie Wilson, Director of Operations. Adam Rosatelli, Director of Finance.
James Shalisman, Council to the OAA.
And Cindy Newman, Western Region abatement coordinator.
Very much. Okay, the next item of business today is for our board to consider a motion to approve the minutes from our November 9th board meeting. Those were posted on the website for our review. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So make a motion.
Okay, I'm gonna take.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Spencer. And you have seconded it, so we will be, Mr. Sheriff Baird will second it. So all in favor of approval of the minutes? Please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, any opposition, say nay. Okay. Okay, at this time, I'd like to formally introduce and welcome Ms. Debbie Ritter to the OAA board. She has served on the Chesapeake City Council since 1998.
Yeah, I used to have friends.
With the resignation of Mr. Jim Holland from the board, we were left with a vacancy, as you guys know, the seat that represents local government, elected officials. And Debbie was nominated by the Virginia Municipal League to take on this role and then subsequently appointed by Governor Youngkin. So welcome. We're really glad to have you. We also had a recognition of Mrs. Sharon Buckman, who will be leaving us as her term is expiring, but we're going to wait till Senator Pillion is here because he wanted to be here for that special presentation. So at this time, I'm going to turn it over to Tony McDowell for the executive director.
Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'd like to start off by first getting one administrative item out of the way. For the record, for the minutes, Senator Pillion is attending virtually because his home is located more than 60 miles away. And Delegate Brianna Sewell may be in and out of the meeting, as she's gonna join us as she's able. And she also has a home that's more than 60 miles away from the meeting. So it may seem strange that I'm mentioning this, but under the rules of the statute, if members are attending and participating virtually, we have to read that information. The other point of order, I'd like to thank Tim Spencer because it's his idea when I suggested Stanton that he said, well, you should look at Hotel 24 South. And so those of you who have a room here, hopefully you've seen your room already, and it's acceptable. They've done a great job with the meeting space, and before they took it away, the food was good. So and thank you to Kara for getting all the arrangements set up. So To begin my report, I'm gonna kind of give you a little bit of a summary of what's been happening since the last full meeting of the board. So it seems like we were just meeting not very long ago. It was actually 7 months ago. In November of last year, we met in Abingdon, and Senator Billion hosted us there. And there's been a lot that's happened in those last 7 months. And so, as an example of that, those of you who are here at the Grants Committee meeting, from noon to 1:30, Charlie reminded us about the 3 different Grants Committee meetings that have been held in that interval. So there were Grants Committee meetings in December, January, and February. And during her report, our Dr. Thomason will talk about the activity of the Grants Committee in each of those meetings later on the agenda today. In addition, during this time, the staff developed a guidance for Operation Stop, which is specifically targeted at opioid prevention, and brought that guidance to the Grants Committee for approval, and then basically went out, communicated it to the eligible jurisdictions, assisted them with putting together grant applications, and very pleased to announce that during its meeting earlier today, the Grants Committee recommended or voted on approval of all 7 Operation Stop groups. So that's definitely a win for Virginia. We completed the implementation of our MTX Salesforce grants and financial management platform. And so this platform allows every city in Virginia, every county, to have their own landing page within the platform. And they go to that landing page and they can see all the information about their eligibility to apply for grants, how much money they've got available, how much we project they're gonna receive in the future from the settlements. They can look at historical documents that shows them everything that they've applied for in the past, their performance measures, everything they need in one place. They can even communicate with us through the system. Instead of using email, there's a function called Chatter that records all of the conversation back and forth forever. And so if there's ever a dispute, if I don't work here anymore, if Charlie leaves, and no one can find my emails, it won't matter, because all of that will be maintained within the system, which will provide the historical accuracy that we need. If there's ever an audit years from now, if there's ever any questions about what was approved or what was recommended, all of that. So really a great system. Most of the team, except for me, really got involved in building this system. I was kind of hands off. I appreciate Matt leading that effort along with Charlie, Adam, and other folks. And so really the system is significant, and it's made what we're doing as far as bringing grants to you, it's made it possible. And it's created the reconciliation and record keeping that we need. I know during his report, Charlie's gonna provide you some more specific examples about that portal, but you know, it's not as sexy as announcing an award, but it's a big deal having this system. And it provides, quite honestly, it provides not only the assurances that the board deserves that everything's being recorded properly and the math all adds up, but it also provides, I think, some protection for the whole organization that we've got all of these records maintained in place, which is pretty scary when we were trying to do it all on PDF files and paper documents and whatnot. So that's a huge thank you for the team for getting that together. In addition, we've been working with the Virginia Information Technology Agency to build out a statewide substance use disorder data analytics platform, and I'll provide you a little more detail about that in a few moments. Obviously, we've been monitoring bills of interest that came forward during the 2025 session of the General Assembly, as well as the budget amendments that went into the governor's final approved budget by the General Assembly. You have already received a detailed summary of that from Adam Rostelli, and he will touch on that again during this meeting, during his presentation. And then we have conducted, so we're at the beginning of June. Since January, we've done 13 live webinars under the Abatement Academy umbrella. So this includes everything from best practices and gold standard type of programs for cities, counties, and communities to consider implementing as a way of using the COVID settlement funds, as well as technical assistance training from our team to our potential grant recipients. And finally, this is sort of understated, we presented on behalf of the OAA at numerous state and national workshops and meetings. I would ask for the next slide, just as an example of that is that probably the biggest example of that outreach is our participation in the largest prescription and illicit summit, drug summit in North America, called the RX Summit. This was held in Nashville in April and had several board members in attendance, several staff members. We had presentations that we were able to participate. Charlie Lintingham was accepted as an author of a poster that was presented during the RX Summit. You see him in the picture there on the screen, joined by Ms. Jody Mance, who's a Virginia native, but currently is the executive director of the South Carolina Center for Excellent Addiction. Really sort of our counterpart, our colleague in South Carolina. She, along with Nita Sakdeva from the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, put this poster together with Charlie about the approach that these three states have taken to providing technical assistance to grant recipients. And kudos to Charlie for doing it. I think he's got a miniature copy of the poster with anybody's interested in taking the details.
Nice. You're one, you sign. Absolutely.
One of the things that our chair, Senator Billion, and the full board has asked of us as a goal is for Virginia to set the standard for the rest of the nation. And one of the ways that we do that is by presenting information both through webinars and in person at different events and conferences around the nation. And Charlie in particular has kind of become a go-to resource for abatement coordinators from states all across the nation. I think they've got Charlie on speed dial. He's made a whole network of friends from other states, but it benefits us as well because it gives us a chance to benchmark what they're doing, what we're doing, and see if there's ideas that we should be implementing here in Virginia, and just sort of compare what we're doing with others and make sure that we're continuing to lead in that. Next slide.
Tony, if I could just say one thing, Tony doesn't like to toot his own horn, but the reality is that everything he just said, I heard from other people at the RX Summit. It was really great to be from the state that is leading. And, you talk about the gold standard. Virginia is the gold standard amongst all of 50 states. And just with very practical application, this poster, because we walked through and they showed it all. Everybody has these different posters and you go through. The only state that had this available for people to walk away with was Virginia. No one else. It was a very practical thing. Some of the posters were huge and had great details. And I asked, do you happen to have a copy? Nope. So it's very practical. And you can literally walk away with something and learn something. And I talked with some other people just about all the things that Tony was responding to. And they are trying to be like Virginia OAA. So that's a really great, it was just really great to hear. So
I would, Madam Chair, this is Senator Pillion. I would echo those same remarks of the meetings that I've attended, the legislative meetings. Virginia, the OAA in Virginia is always pointed to as, like Tony said, the gold standard and what other states should be doing for implementation of their grant award system, and all the programming and all the community networking that we're continuing to do. And that is very, it's a moment of pride for me that I get to participate with such a great team and with such a great board. But I will always challenge that we will continue being the leader, that this isn't just where we stop, this is where we start, and we're going to continue attending meetings and engaging in community events and making sure that we are always number one in the nation.
Well, thank you both for the comments. It's much appreciated. Continuing on, I kind of already started talking about our new grants portal, but there's another element to this that's separate from the actual grants application portal. And it's actually, it's tied into the platform, but it's its own separate thing, which is a public facing dashboard that's actually managed, developed by a different vendor. It's a subcontractor for our primary vendor. And the idea is that we want on our website a public facing data portal that anybody can go to the OAA website and click on it. And in a way that's user friendly and intuitive, see what's happening in their community as it relates to opioid settlement funds. And so the idea is full transparency. And it's not just for citizens, but it's for elected officials, it's for advocates. It's for anybody who wants to know what's happening in Virginia with opioid settlement funds generally, and with OAA grant awards in particular. We are prepared, that dashboard is finished. We're doing some final double checking of the numbers. The grants that were just approved here today are not in the system yet, but they will be over the next couple of, probably a week or two, we'll get them all loaded. And then our plan is to launch this website, this portal, this dashboard on July 7th. And we'll do press releases and lots of information to the public to promote people to use it. Tomorrow morning, for members of the board that are able to spend the night tonight, first thing in the morning, because we know you need to hit the road, 8 o'clock in the morning. Matt is going to give us an overview. Kara, is it in this room? In the same room, we got breakfast ready for you at the hotel. And then at 8 o'clock, we're going to start into an overview of the system. Matt will run through the presentation. It'll take maybe 20-25 minutes to present it all to you. We can play around with the live version so that you can look up the test data. And then we will adjourn and let you hit the road. So that hopefully will be an item that you can stay for tomorrow as an educational topic. This is not a required meeting for the board members. It's optional if you'd like to attend. Next slide. Similarly, we're ready to take on an overhaul of our website. So our website was created and launched in a hurry in August, September of 2022. And we took all the information that we had available at the time and kind of threw it at an unsuspecting employee at the Virginia Information Technology Agency. And he managed to put together a pretty decent basic website that has served our needs for the last 2.5 years. But there is so much more information that we have to share now, and so many things that have changed. So we think it's time for the OAA to envision, design, and launch a completely new looking website. The same address, same URL, but a whole new look. And there's a bit of a marketing piece behind this as well, but the information that we want to have included on the new website would include links to that public-facing dashboard that I just described to you, to the opioid abatement toolkit that VCU has built, which is an amazing website that should all be under the same umbrella. The technical assistance that's available through our own abatement academy, a link to I'm getting ahead of myself here, but the General Assembly provided funding. Senator Killian was involved for the Department of Social Services to contract with a provider to develop a treatment resource locator. And as that comes online, it's a critically needed tool. As that comes online, we'll have that linked to our website. We'll have a link to the Virginia Opioid Abatement Foundation, which I'll be telling you more about in a minute. In short, there's a number of things that this website can and should do. And so no action required here from the board on this immediately. It's more of an information item, but this is part of the plan going into this summer. There will be items of new business where we're seeking permission to have money set aside if we need it to procure some of these web services. We may be able to get what we need from the state without having to pay extra, but we're just not sure about that yet. Next slide. Another item that we need help from the board on relates to our recruitment efforts. And so, I think we've made a pretty strong case that in the areas of the state where we have Cindy, or we have a Cat, or we have a Jenny, we have an abatement resource coordinator. What they do is invaluable with building relationships, answering questions, putting people together and helping them submit their grants. Somehow, Cat and Jenny are able to do this as part-time employees, and kudos to them. We advertised for the part of the state that you see on the slide that's in yellow. We've been advertising that as a part-time opportunity. We've had 3 formal rounds of recruitment and multiple informal efforts to recruit people. And although we've had some applicants, we haven't had what we think we've not found the right person. We've not received very many applications, and we have not found the person that we think is the right person for the job. And after trying this for more than a year, I think I need to come back to the board. I've been reluctant to ask for more full-time positions, but I think for a number of reasons, we need to make this a full-time position so that we can throw the net back out again, cast that net, advertise it as a full-time position with state benefits. I think we'll see a much better response. I would also point out that not only is this a large geographic region, but it's a region of the state where we're having more difficulty penetrating in terms of getting cities and counties to submit applications. In fact, of the cities and counties we use the term that we've not heard from, 25% of them are in this yellow region. And Charlie's gonna report a little bit more about that. And so, one of our goals is to get every city and every county in the state to apply for the money they're entitled to. And so I think that having a position like this is gonna be necessary to get us there. And so the cost difference between funding a part-time position and funding a full-time position, when you factor in benefits, is $60,000. Adam has put that in the proposed budget that we're gonna be presenting to you here shortly. One of the objectives that we had this year that I have to report to you on is the creation of a compliance manual. And so the idea that the board had, that Senator Pillion and I spoke about, that we've been working on, is, for every city and county in Virginia, there's an existing, it's been on the books for many, many years. There's an existing statute that says every city and every county has to have an externally performed audit every year of their expenditures. And that audit has to be reported to the State Auditor of Public Accounts, APA. Well, APA has already created its own audit standards for localities to follow when reporting their opioid settlement funds. We did a webinar with the APA for the benefit of cities and counties to talk about this, and there were a lot of questions. There seemed to be still a great deal of confusion about what a city or county needs to do to stay out of trouble, quite honestly, and prepare for one of these audits. So we put together, with assistance from the APA, we put together a request for proposals, a request for quotes. We put together a procurement document. And our administrative partner, the Virginia Department of Behavioral Health, so they sent it out through the state's procurement system, EVO. They sent it to 1,600 firms, accounting firms and professional management service firms, where we were looking for proposals that the OAA would enter into a contract and pay for an audit manual, an audit compliance manual to be developed that cities and counties and external auditors could use to approach the audit of opioid settlement funds in a systematic and predictable manner. So 1,600 firms, it's like 1,590 some firms contacted, and we didn't get a single response. So the procurement arm of DBHDS sent a follow-up message and asked if any of them would share reasons why, and we didn't get a clear reason why. I think the bottom line is it's a really narrowly defined slice of expertise that a lot of these firms just don't have. And so we're kind of back to the drawing board. The plan going forward that I have in mind is to work a little bit more closely with the Virginia Association of Counties and the Virginia Municipal League, get their participation and see how we need to tweak this and try once again to get it out for the benefit of our cities and counties. But it's probably not going to happen in time for the current round of audits that we do from cities and counties back to the APA later this year. So this is, unfortunately, we're hoping to bring you a win on this one, but it's one that we're still working. I've already kind of introduced the topic, but in the current state biennial budget, so for fiscal year 25 and fiscal year 26, there is an appropriation of $4 million coming out of the state's opioid settlement funds. $4 million. Along with, budget language that directs the Virginia Information Technology Agency and the Office of Data Governance and Analytics to procure a new enterprise cloud-based substance use data analytics platform for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And I think the best way to describe this is, how do we know how we're doing as a state when it comes to substance use disorder? What interventions are happening? How much do they cost, and are they effective? And there's a lot of data that's out there already that's being collected, particularly by state agencies, but also by localities. But there's no good place to share all that data, to put it into a warehouse, to define the data in a way that you can make comparisons between the variables, to generate reports that can guide decision making. And so that's how I would describe the intention of this. And the direction that was in the legislation, in the budget, directed VITA and ODGA to start the process with a needs assessment. And it listed a bunch of stakeholders that needed to be involved, both state agencies, localities, community service boards, professional associations, organizations that are involved in the industry. And so VITA and ODGA entered into a contract with a consulting firm to lead that effort back in the fall, and the OAA played a key role in that needs assessment. The firm that was hired was Gartner, and Gartner published their report in February, and they did a really nice job with the needs assessment. We have it, the OAA published it on our website. If you're interested, I can show you how to get to it. But that's just the first phase. Once you have the needs assessment in place, then there's a couple of steps that need to occur. The next step is to figure out, okay, VITA and ODGA can create this thing, but who's gonna be the owner? Who are they building it for? Who's gonna drive it? And there wasn't a single state agency that would raise their hand. And so, you know, when like you're with your friends and trying to figure out who's gonna pay the bill, and everybody's kind of looking in the corner. So I raised my hand. So OAA is gonna be what they call the business owner. So we're gonna drive this system. We don't have to pay for it. It's already funded through the state budget. VITA and ODGA are building it, but they're building it for the benefit of the state. And I think that OAA was uniquely positioned to be the entity that operates this thing. And it's not that we would do it in a vacuum. We're forming, our vision is to form an advisory group so that the advisory group has input onto things like who has access to it and that type of thing. But we had to get into this position to continue to move this thing forward. The current challenge is to drive towards the first release of data this summer and the second release of data in the fall. And the challenge behind doing that is getting all of the data owners to contribute their data. And that's been a lot more complicated than I expected. And so we are struggling through that now. And it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but we're making slow, steady progress. And I think that's a pretty honest assessment of where we are. We do expect a very basic release next month in July. And I will endeavor to keep the board apprised on the progress of this. We're not going to back off because this is opioid settlement money that's being used. And ultimately, you know, the success or failure of the OAA, how do you measure it? You know, it's part of it is us telling our own story, but you know, right now, overdose deaths are down, thank God. But what's causing it? What are really the variables behind that? And different people will tell you different reasons, but what happens if I mean, I don't want to say it, but what happens if something else comes along? You know, it's heroin, then fentanyl, then when we've got xylazine, what's next? And if we don't have a system of data analytics to help us with policy, OAA could take the credit or we could take the blame. And so there's no retreating on this issue, and it's something that I'm committed to help us see our way through it. I'm going to pause here and answer any questions on this piece.
Yeah, I'll make a comment and a question if that's okay. Tony, so thank you. First of all, I carried this budget amendment a couple years ago because Tony's right. There's no, everybody's operating in their own silo, and there's no sharing of information. And while we distribute all this funding, we don't really know if it's working. We believe it's working, but we don't know if it's working or it's working because of another variable. So I thank you, Tony, for actually taking the lead. I think we are the body that needs to be the coordinator of all these different state agencies. Like it or not, I think that we're the right entity to do that. So my question for you is, does there need to be legislation brought forward that directs the other state agencies to that they shall share this information, or do you sense that with time they'll do that on their own?
I assume that's a great question. I think that is the option of, I would suggest an option of last resort, if nothing else, because of the timing that would be involved. We really need the data now. I believe we're at a point, when I was fire chief, I used to tell my folks that hope is not a plan. I hope we're getting the data, but I actually do believe that we've turned the corner with the agencies that are most concerned about sharing the data. And I think the point of view that we're hearing from some of the agencies is that they have a significant concern about data being misused, particularly personally identifiable information. And so hopefully, as we work to address those concerns, they will open the books up to us, so to speak. But if we hit any more barriers beyond this point, Senator, I may be reaching out to you about other options.
Can I just add a quick question? Senator, this is Joe Barron. To your point, and I'm gonna ask Tony, obviously, what his thoughts are. But if a law were created which required reporting of data to the OAA, such as what's being suggested, would that be something that would incentivize the 25% who are currently not applying for funds or who are currently not looking at the problem the way they probably should? Because if you're required to do something, then maybe they would get on board with seeking the monies that they need to get it done.
Well, let me offer a comment on that, and then I don't want to speak for Senator Billion, but the data needs that we have right now are more from state agencies than from localities. We would like to see localities participate in data sharing. One of the things that the team and I try to keep in mind all the time is that the way the distribution of opioid settlement funds in Virginia was envisioned through courts is that the cities and the counties were co-plaintiffs in this legal action against the defendant companies. And so our cities and our counties participated in this litigation. And so we're just here to help them receive the money that they sought from these companies. And so I remain convinced that it has a lot more to do with making it easy for them, getting it in front of them, and facilitating the process. And we've got cities and counties out there that are struggling to make payroll and aren't really expecting enormous amounts of money from the settlements. And so it's not necessarily their top priority. And so we try to take on as much of the burden as possible to help them figure out a way to make the most of those funds, as opposed to saying, we're here from the state and you have to participate. Yeah.
Yeah, and Sheriff, to follow up on that, when I envision reporting of data, that data would be coming from state agencies, not localities. There's a lot of programming throughout as you're well aware, programming throughout the different agencies of the Commonwealth, that there's some overlap. There's some programs that are working great. There's some programs that aren't and could do better. And we just need to be looking at outcomes and using that data for our own benefit and for the Commonwealth's benefit. And that's what this database that we put a budgetary amendment forward for, was to get everybody, all that information out of those pockets and into a shareable database that we could all benefit from. Not necessarily the information that would be coming from the results of the OAA distribution, which that of course could be from those localities, but more so what the other agencies throughout the Commonwealth are doing. Hopefully that answers your question.
Hey, Tony, I'm a bit surprised, leveraging the Department of Behavioral Health. And I know that they did quite a bit over the last couple of years to really update their IT systems.
Yes.
And I know, all CSBs are required to, as part of our performance contract, to push information to them. And we typically have done that once a month, but as of July 1, they're going to be transitioning, and every CSB has to do this, to a new system where data will get pushed to them daily, matter of fact, every 2 hours. So it'd be a significant difference in how information is being pushed. It seems to me that a system that's set up, we already have 40 statewide entities that are going to be sending information to a department in the state every 2 hours. There might be a way to kind of leverage that at some point. I guess the other platform that seems, in the same sphere, if you will be the crisis data platform. And that's, we have to follow all the same, the 42 CFR rules that any healthcare entity that's getting these monies would have to do. And the interesting thing about that one is it's not just the CSBs, but the private entities in the community that have to access that crisis platform as well. So I think to me that may even kind of narrow some of the things that you're talking about, what to do here, where, and the Department of Behavioral Health, that is, their baby as well. So it seems to me there's a couple of systems out there we might be able to leverage that are available already.
Yeah, that's a great point. We are getting all of the information that we've requested from DBHDS. I'm familiar with that new data platform that you're describing. Interestingly, the OAA has awarded DBHDS the funds to staff that platform. So the person that I'm dealing with on that is actually paid for through an agreement with the OAA. And so, which is really just an example of one of the reasons why we're probably the right entity to be managing this. And I don't want to belabor the point too much, but I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how I see this data being useful. We have the ability right now in Virginia, we have all the data elements that are necessary to compare for a system to make evaluations on an individual basis, and then to extrapolate that to show you trends. So for example, how many people who are released from the Department of Corrections experience an overdose, whether it's fatal or non-fatal, within, choose a time frame, 6 weeks of release. That data, all that data exists, but the comparison currently cannot be made because the Department of Corrections data doesn't overlap the overdose data that's managed by different agencies, right? If we can overlap those, we can start to see the analysis. We believe we're gonna have access to the all payer claims database through Virginia Health Information, that allows every time a person is diagnosed with a substance use disorder, you can then track that person and see when other sort of adverse events occur, whether it's being arrested, being incarcerated, having an overdose, being admitted to the hospital, being put on one of the medications that's covered under prescription monitoring program, like buprenorphine. And then you can extrapolate data from that. So how many people with a substance use disorder who are on buprenorphine experience an adverse event over the course of 2 years compared to those that are not on buprenorphine? All of this data is right there for the picking. It's right. All the data is collected. It's the analysis that's missing. And it's getting the different entities that own this data to submit it all into one, I call it a data lake, so that we can go fishing. Does that make sense?
And they don't want to do that because it's data and they don't afford it.
Well, I think traditionally the agencies are protective of their data because they want to make sure that that the interpretation that people make doesn't misrepresent the story. It's probably the best way to put it.
They want to tell their own story. They don't want somebody else to tell. Public safety doesn't want to share with HHR. HHR doesn't want public safety, et cetera, et cetera. And PII, they hide behind that, but they just don't want to play. They don't want to cooperate. So you're dealing with little kingdoms.
And they're paid state employees that are making these choices.
Yeah.
So I'll probably whet your appetite for more conversations this afternoon, but that's where we stand on the SUDA plan. Next time. Okay, during the board meeting in November, we had a conversation about whether it would be beneficial if a nonprofit foundation was to be formed and pull up alongside the OAA to help with the sole purpose of assisting the OAA. And I'm pleased to announce that that foundation has been formally incorporated. There's a picture of the certificate of incorporation from the state.
Good job, team.
So we had to put together an initial slate of trustees, and had to have at least 5, and so the trustees include our very own Tim Spencer, Tyler Lester of Abingdon, myself, Dr. Jackie Britz, who's with the VCU Rights Center. I think many of you had a chance to meet Dr. Britz, and Renee Robinson, who is someone in my network who is a banker, but also used to run a Habitat for Humanity at a county level, so she understands about development and nonprofit management, seeking donations and that sort of thing. The primary goal for the foundation over the next 12 months is to launch a statewide best practices conference, best practices in substance use abatement conference, really to highlight examples of what communities are doing in Virginia with their opioid settlement funds. What kind of outcomes they're having, and let cities and counties and providers from all across the state come together to hear these stories. And not only to meet with each other, but also to meet with organizations that can offer services, so vendors, sponsors, nonprofits, entities that we can't give funding to directly, and we can't accept funding from directly. But the foundation can build that relationship and use that relationship to continue to build this conference. And so, not to put too sharp of an edge on it, but the foundation can run the conference because they can sell exhibit space, they can process payments for registration, and they can process sponsorships. These are things that I didn't want to bring to you as a board and have to take on as part of what we do as an authority. I mean, our job is to give grants out to fight the opioid crisis, not to run a conference business, right? And so under new business today, you'll see that I'm asking for some seed funding from the OAA, in the amount of $50,000, and the ability to put together a contract between the OAA and the foundation, whereby we share some business services like the website, OAA staff can open their mail, that kind of thing. And in turn, the foundation would launch this conference. They use the seed money to secure a location, to get a events planning company working for us, or working for them, and to launch the conference. Over time, the conference should be able to pay for itself and even generate revenue over expenses, and use some of that difference to pay the OAA back. And so all that needs to be put into a legal document, but rather than having me sign that document on behalf of the authority, what I'm gonna recommend on a new business is that the contract would come before the OAA's finance committee, where the finance committee decide on whether it's appropriate, and let the chair of the finance committee, who's the treasurer, sign that contract on behalf of the OAA. So you'll see that under new business. I'm happy to pause and ask if there's any questions or concerns about this idea. It's a little different. I will say that when I just mentioned that idea at this type of conference, there's a lot of excitement by potential attendees and potential vendors. When we were at the RX Summit, I walked around and they have hundreds of exhibitors there. And I walked around the exhibit floor and collected a card from every single table so that we don't have to pay, we don't have to buy a list. foundation requirements. And when they asked me why I was doing this, I told them, they're like, well, sign us up, we'll do it right now. So I think there'd be a lot of interest in this.
I'll have a Tony, have other states done this already, or is this again something we're leading the way in?
The shortest answer is no, not that I'm aware of. Ohio's version of the Opioid Abatement Authority is itself a nonprofit. So there's, every state has a different model, but I'm not aware of any state that has a state agency that's doing the work that we're doing and has a foundation supporting it. But the concept is not unique in that a lot of government entities have foundations that solely exist to support that government entity, whether it's a sheriff's office or a human services department.
Library Foundation, Parks and Rec Foundation.
Tobacco Commission.
Yes, that's a great point. The Tobacco Commission has their own foundation, and as does the Virginia Foundation for Healthy Youth. So we're not without precedent doing this. Also under new business, you're going to see some proposed updates, revisions to some of our policies and bylaws. This is purely just sort of the normal business type changes that we need, some housekeeping type of items that we need from an administrative standpoint. Under the bylaws amendment, you will see a very minor change to the appeals process for cities and counties. So cities and counties can appeal a decision of the grants committee if it's for one of the individual grants, because they're not competitive, right? And so when grants committee is deciding whether or not to award an individual grant, they're really deciding whether or not the idea itself has merit. So they're not choosing one grant over another because they're not competitive. And so we wanted to make sure that the city or county had the ability to appeal that decision to the full board. The change that you're going to vote on today really sort of memorializes the fact that appeal is only available for the non-competitive grants. For the competitive grants, the grants committee has to evaluate all of the grants competing with each other. And so that's not open to an appeal. That's a final decision. Just like there's, if my kid applies to college, doesn't get in, there's no appeal, right? Because it was a competitive process. That happened. Then on the policy updates, we have to, every year, we have to do an annual update. By law, we have to do an annual update to our ability to conduct virtual meetings and for people to participate in the meetings virtually. So you'll see that. And then I'm looking for, as the executive director of the authority, under our policy updates, to do some of the very basic budget reconciliations with our grants, including truing up the carryover amount without having to go back to the grants committee for a vote. So in other words, we're not giving any more money, but we're truing up the numbers so that they balance out against projected versus actual. All right, another significant item that I would like to discuss with the board has to do with the OAA's public relations and communications. We are getting too big. And we have too many projects for the staff to be able to handle telling the story on our own. And I believe, and I'm recommending to the board, that we need to contract with professionals to help us tell these stories. And so just as someone just said, if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to tell it for you, and it could be favorable or it could be unfavorable. And we have a fantastic story to tell. In fact, how many projects do we have now, Charlie? 160?
So, yeah, between the state agency and the state agency and city county, plus another 12 planning grants that are still finishing up.
I mean, for Charlie to summarize for the grants committee at a high level, just the new applications took more than an hour. And that was just doing a quick high level summary. Each one of those could be a 60 minutes episode, right? And I'm not exaggerating. There's some amazing things happening. And the staff, as much as we'd like to be able to tell the story on behalf of the authority, honestly, we don't have the background to do that. We're not marketing professionals. And we're pretty busy helping these organizations create their success. And, you know, like, in my mind, I'm trying to figure out what the press release from today is gonna look like when we send it out on Monday. And, you know, I think we've done pretty good so far without having a professional firm, but what we're looking for in terms of the scope of work is for an organization or group of organizations that can provide us with a comprehensive, cohesive strategy for our public relations and public communications. And provide us, take a look at our branding materials, offer any recommendations for ensuring that our brand is updated as needed and fully integrated into our overall PR strategy. And we want to make sure that our stories and our information is shared specifically in a way that it becomes accessible, digestible by decision makers, including elected officials at the local level, at the General Assembly, and the administration, and the staffers that support those elected officials. So that when we do go in front of a committee in the General Assembly, or we do go in front of a city council or a board of supervisors, that they know a little bit about our story. And at some point, it's entirely likely that we will have a recipient that maybe doesn't do something right with their own. Right, I think you have to be realistic and expect that there's gonna be a problem at some point. And we don't want that to be the only story that's told by the OAA. So, this strategy needs to include our website, it needs to include social media, which we currently don't have any kind of social media presence at all. It needs to include our press releases, it needs to include, I'd like to see twice a month stories getting published, like a PDF that can be emailed out to different audiences. There's lots of things that can be done. And there's, you know, the opportunities here are really unbounded. And so under new business, there's going to be an item where I'm seeking your authority to try to negotiate, to procure and negotiate a contract or group of contracts to make this happen. I would all love spending opioid settlement money for us to tell our own story, but I think we're at the point where we need to, where it becomes a business necessity.
And I'll follow up on that. That our story has to be told, just like you said, if we're not telling our story, someone else is going to tell our story, and it may not be the story we want told. And I would just include in that proposal that, I mean, there are some great outcomes that have already been happening I know in my region, that would make wonderful videos that would encourage other entities to apply for OAA funding, or other localities to step forward and say, hey, they did that here, why aren't we doing that in our town or our city or our county? So I would definitely, I'm in full favor of this. I think it's a wonderful step forward. But I also think that it needs to include some visual presentations, not just written word. We need to see some video documentaries that are really telling the story of what we've created.
We will add that to the scope. It's a great suggestion. Thanks. Another sort of housekeeping item is that, and thanks to James Schliessman for bringing this to my attention, we are at a point where we need to trademark our seal. And that's in order to safeguard the OAA against misappropriation of our logo by other entities, so that you could very easily have an organization misrepresent themselves as being an OAA partner in order to secure some sort of benefit. And so in order to the basic level of protecting the organization that way is to go to the US Patent and Trademark Office and get the seal patented and trademarked. There is a process for doing that is a legal process that's not within the scope of services that the Office of the Attorney General can provide at OAA. So we're looking at a price of somewhere between $2,500 to $5,000, kind of at the high end, to get that trademark done. And so another item you'll see under new business is to authorize staff to procure those legal services to get that trademark in place. If we need to spend the money.
Thank you.
Maybe so.
Not obvious, yes, apparent, so.
And then I think this is my last slide, just a reminder of the meetings that we have left for the remainder of the year. We have 3 more grants committee meetings coming up. August first, virtual. That's where we're presenting you with, primarily the purpose of that is for you to consider awards to state agencies. September 26th will be in person. We're tentatively planning to do that at Farmville. That's primarily for amendments to existing awards, as well as the possibility of some new individual awards to cities and counties. And then on November 19th, we will have kind of the format we're doing today. We have a grants committee and a full board back to back, but those will be held in a virtual form. The leadership of the board has the ability to call additional meetings if they're needed, but those are the meetings that are on the calendar right now. And Madam Vice Chair, that's my comments.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive report. It's great to hear all these different details. Okay, next on the agenda, we have the treasurer's report, which will be provided by Adam Rosatelli, our Director of Finance.
Great, thank you. You can pass this on. Thank you. All right, so I'll begin with an update on the OAA share of estimated settlement payments and the corresponding budget. So the biggest change since this information was last presented to you is that we reincorporated the estimated reduced settlement amounts, given that that was recently refinalized. So this totals $57.1 million over 16 years, with payments projected to commence in the fourth quarter of this calendar year. And there was a new wave of payments, which we've been calling the third tier payments. It's a term that OHA uses that we've just adopted, but those amount to $5.2 million in total, most of which is attributable to the Violin Pharmaceuticals settlement. And so these are much smaller scale opioid manufacturers, which is kind of reflective of the size of the settlement payment. So with those additions, the total estimated settlement payments to the OAA are now $620.1 million, and to date, $175.7 million have been deposited to the opioid abatement fund, which, as you know, is where the OAA's share of the funds are statutorily directed to go. Next slide. So now a cash flow analysis. This is for the FY 2025 accounting period ending May 31st. So fiscal year to date cash inflows from settlement payments and interest earnings on deposits to the opioid abatement fund total $36.5 million. Fiscal year to date cash outflows, including actual state and local grant distributions and administrative costs of $30 million, resulting in $125.7 million cash on hand. Next slide. All right, so this is an interest earnings analysis that we've done. So this is just a quick update on the investment return. So if you recall, the OAA had engaged with the Public Resources Advisory Group, or PRAG, to conduct a feasibility analysis of securitization and alternate investment options, which it completed in August of 2023. This report identified that due to legal reasons, the securitization of opioid settlement fund was not feasible. The report also examined the OAA's investment options as provided in code and determined that the OAA's only option of investing with the Virginia retirement system was not practically or logistically feasible. So since that time, OAA staff has evaluated whether it would be prudent to attempt to expand its investment options and conducted its own analysis of our current kind of passive investment posture, and then looking at other public and private investment opportunities that might be available. So the result of this analysis ultimately concluded that maintaining our existing practice of investing funds through the Department of Treasury's primary liquidity portfolio, which balances safety, liquidity, and return, is the best option for the OAA moving forward. So shown on the slide is the actual and estimated quarterly interest distributions and return based on a rolling average of fund balances for the duration of the fiscal year. As you can see, the OAA is projected to earn a risk and cost-free return of about 4.4% or $5.8 million over the course of the fiscal year. And I think it's also worth noting that this interest generated on the deposits exceeds the cost of the OAA's annual administrative expenses by nearly $2 million a year. So we're actually taking in more money than it costs to run the OAA by over $2 million on an annual basis, which is certainly a good thing. Are there any questions? All right, so now transitioning to the projected funds available for grant awards. So looking at the graph, this depicts the information contained in the table above. You can see the estimated annual settlement payments for each year, which is shown as the blue line, and the annual budgeted expenditures for each category represented as the stacked bar charts. So what the payments depict are all payments with the exception of those new third tier settlement payments, given that they're so recent that the payment schedule and the duration of those payments hasn't been made available yet, so it would be kind of premature to estimate whether it's going to fall with the associated expenditures. So given that they've been excluded, so that's about 615 million that's included from this, for these purposes, through 2042. So looking at the revised payment and expenditure schedule overall, again, there were very few expenditures in FY 23 relative to revenues received, and then grant awards increased substantially in 24 and 25. This is in relation to the estimated settlement payment revenues, which totaled about $179 million over those 3 years, right? So that carried forward, net carried forward balance of about $103 million going into the next fiscal year, with 33 million of that carried forward available for individual distribution awards. And then the rest is kind of spread out over the duration of the period, and that's consistent with the board's adopted measured budget approach. Next slide, please. All right, so now transitioning to the proposed amendments to the OAA's FY 26 budget. So the graph and table on the slide show the budgeted allocation of grant awards, unrestricted funds, and administrative costs in the biennium. Adjustments to the budget in FY 26 reflect the newest estimated settlement payment amounts, as well as carry forward of prior year balances, budgeting consistent with the board's adopted long-term financial plan. The OAA budget also matches the approved appropriation contained in the Commonwealth's recently adopted Appropriation Act, Chapter 725. Looking at exclusively the administrative portion of the budget, I apologize, it's really kind of hard to see.
Hey, Adam, sorry to interrupt you, but
Yeah,
page 7 of your agenda has the actual.
yeah, thank you, Tony. It's gonna be a lot easier to see everything's up there. So you may recall that the last time the board reviewed and adopted the amended budget was in November of last year at that meeting, and there were a number of one-time costs in the current fiscal year FY 25, totaling about $1.4 million associated with the new grant management system. As a result of those costs dropping off, given that the system has been developed and it's gone online, all that's left are kind of the O&M related to the system, not those development costs. Those are dropping off, so the administrative budget as a share of the overall OAA budget has gone back down to 4.9%, which is below the board's target of 5%, and reflecting a reduction of about $280,000 from the current fiscal year administrative budget. The revised budget, and Tony mentioned a number of these items in his presentation, but the revised budget contains a number of items identified as kind of critical for OAA staff to achieve the board's organizational objectives and actions contained within the Commonwealth's Approved Appropriation Act, which are depicted in the list of those amendments you see on the slide, which are already included in those totals in the better seen in that sheet that was handed out. So these proposed amendments total approximately $847,000, and again are already included in those totals, which derive that administrative budget, which is 4.9% of the total budget for the fiscal year. Items of note include the professional services Tony mentioned before, as well as a 3% merit-based pay adjustment that was contained in the previous budget. So it's just reflected here informationally because that was approved actually in the November 9th meeting. And that is effective June 10th. And then costs we can look at part-time resource coordinator. Next slide, please. There we go. So I'll conclude with this portion of the presentation with a quick update on the audit of the OAA by the Auditor of Public Accounts, or APA. So as you may recall, 2.2-2372 of the Code of Virginia provides that the OAA is subject to an annual audit by the APA. So last month on May 1st, the APA commenced its formal entrance meeting with OAA staff to discuss the audit process, detailing the audit objectives and scope, which are all listed there. We have an official memorandum that kind of memorializes all these things. what they're conducting is a performance type audit. They have, in-depth financial statement type audits, and they have performance audits. So what they're doing is a performance audit of the OAA. The broad objectives of determining if there are proper internal controls in place over the OAA's administrative expenses that are processed by the Department of Behavioral Health and Developmental Services, which, as you know, is our third-party administrative agency that performs those functions on our behalf. As well as to ensure that the OA has established proper internal controls over the grants management system and grants management process to maintain compliance with applicable laws, settlement agreements. Corresponding to that, the audit's scope includes the OA's administrative expenses, the grants information system or grant portal that we were describing, including its information system security, the grants management process, including compliance with applicable laws and settlement agreements, with the APA indicating that that scope may be modified throughout the course of the audit if they find anything else they want to examine. So that is ongoing, and they have indicated that they would like to wrap that up sometime this month. So a report will be issued to us that they have any findings that will be preliminarily shared with the OAA staff, which we will in turn share with the board prior to that formal document being presented to you.
And to follow up with that, I have a call with them this next week.
Yes, thank you, sir. Yes, with these, if there's a board, it's practice that the APA would contact the chair of that board and communicate their intentions with respect to the audit.
And so, our annual application process for cities and counties opens, or it opened this last round on October 1st, and it closes on April 1st. And we get almost all of our applications in the 2 weeks before the due date. 118 plus applications that came in seeking $33 million. It was the exact same time that APA showed up and said they wanted to audit. And you don't get to tell the APA, sorry, we're busy. So kudos to Adam that he's been researching grants and working with the auditors at the same time. And so we actually look forward to, I'm sure that the APA is going to find some things that we need to back up and some T's that we need to cross and policies that we need to have in place. So we're looking forward to getting their report.
Yes, sir. And that concludes my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for Adam? Okay, next on our agenda, going back to Adam for legislative update.
Thank you. So just a brief overview of the OA related items from the 2025 legislative session. I know that a couple of weeks ago, you received that memo and kind of a comprehensive list of all budget items and legislation that was related or even kind of tangentially related to the OA. It's pretty comprehensive, so I won't go through these items. But again, May 2nd, the governor signed a new budget. It's chapter 725 that amends the previous biennial budget, chapter 2. And so pointing out just a few highlights related to that, there's a total now of $57 million, all funds for opioid prevention and treatment services, and that excludes the OA's own appropriation related to the grants that we make. So that's other things relating to opioid prevention and treatment and so forth. Looking specifically at the Commonwealth Opioid Abatement and Remediation Fund, an additional $1.1 million was provided, bringing the biennial total to $35.6 million. And I'll provide in just a moment, kind of a broader overview of the core fund. In addition, there were a number of opioid substance use related language only amendments contained in the budget that are also impactful, but they're again just language only, and they're all provided in that list that was provided to the board just a couple of weeks ago. So transitioning to the bill side of it, there were 35 related bills introduced, of which 20 passed and were signed into law. And these bills are generally have an effective date of July 1st. Unless otherwise specified, I know there were a couple out there that had a delayed effective date to get things in order before they become effective. But generally speaking, that's July 1st. Those become effective. Next slide, please. So again, just a brief overview. More funds. Again, this is the Commonwealth share of opioid settlement funds at 15%. It doesn't flow to the OAA. It goes through the appropriation process and into the budget. So And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention this was established via legislation carried by Senator Bill in 2023. So it's kind of a lockbox, so to speak, of the funds that go to the Commonwealth for opioid settlement fund, opioid settlement and abatement purpose. So let's see here. So a total 35.6 million has been appropriated over the biennium. And a little bit more if you go all the way back to FY 24, when the first 1.4 million was appropriated in chapter 1 from the 2023 special session. So this is of the approximately 66.9 million in deposits that have gone to the core fund to date, and roughly 170 million in total estimated payments to the Commonwealth it is projected to receive through 2042. So you can just take a quick glance at how these funds have been deployed in that chart. And I won't go through all of them, but you can see the new have been identified by just saying new there in the left-hand column. And that's just, again, just $1.1 million was added in the current budget, bringing it to its roughly $36 million total. And to date, about $2.7 million of that appropriation has actually been expended, which isn't a lot. Almost all of it is related to VDH purchasing opioid reversal agents, so this is going to be a good use. But a big chunk of it is related to that opioid reversal program, 16 million of that appropriation, and that's why offset has to take place yet. So that that concludes my legislative update. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Adam? And good afternoon, everybody. The voice from is here, so thank you all for patience and letting me participate virtually. And thank you,
What are your for?
Sarah, for helping out. Okay. So Sarah, I'm gonna turn it over to you. You talked about the grants earlier today.
Happy to share. So since the last meeting of our full board, grants committee has conducted 3 meetings. You can read the information on the slide. Most of the items considered by our committee pertain to amendments for existing awards, as well as making the awards to the cities and counties from their individual grant distributions. During our meeting in January on the 21st, the committee received a report from staff with recommendations on the implementation of what you guys have heard is called our Operation Stop Grant Program. It's great to hear about that all eligible city and county were submitted. That's they're being funded, so that's going to really address specific groups that have a higher overdose rate, so that's really exciting. And of course, next slide, immediately before this meeting today, the grants committee met and we reviewed the staff recommendations for awards for the upcoming fiscal year. The total amount of new funds awarded totaled just over 32.6 million, as you see on the slide. This is the largest set of new awards that we've made since the authority was formed, and it puts us close to $100 million in total awards in just over 2.5 years. So very impressive, just great work that Virginia's doing. On the next slide, this is a point of discussion. I wanted to get the full input and discussion from our board. This is an issue that, as we read through the statute, if this addresses equitable distribution goals for the abatement authority, and the statute that governs our duties. This is what it states. So listen to the words carefully, and you will see where it can cause some issues. Makes awards from the fund in a manner that distributes funds equitably among all community service regions of the Commonwealth, including the establishment of mandatory minimum percentages of funds to be awarded from the Commonwealth to each participating locality. So this has caused some confusion and just difficulty in allocation of funds. So staff is seeking our input so that a written policy can be drafted that would memorialize and clarify what our approach toward meeting this section of the statute really would mean. So Tony, you want to add some more comments and we can have some discussion?
Yes, thank you very much. each time that we've come before you with recommendations or awards, we have tried to show you what each of the areas of the state should be eligible to receive versus how much we're recommending that they receive. And it's been out of balance. And the reason is that we can and we have come up with a method for allocating money to each one of the DBHTS regions. Let me stop there for a second. This language says each of the community service board regions. And the community service board, every community service board has its own region. So I don't think that it meant all 40 CSP, all 40 CSBs. The interpretation that we've been working from is that what they mean by that is DBHTS regions. So we have these 5 DBHTS regions. We use the harm per capita formula that's contained throughout all of the settlement agreements in Virginia, or the agreements in Virginia, to come up with a budgeted amount for each one of those regions. And we can show you what the budget is for each one. Problem is, we can budget that, but if they don't apply for the money, then we can't award them money that they haven't applied for. And so when we come to you with a budget competitive awards, we're recommending, and you see this much money for Region 3 and this much money for Region 1, that just reflects the fact that we got a lot more applications from Region 3 than we did for Region 1. So we tried to set them all up for equitable distribution. But if they don't apply for the money, the outcome might not look equitable in terms of the number of dollars going to each region. So that, and I think we've tried to communicate that each time that we've come before the grants committee. I think we're at the point now where we would like to get feedback from the full board about whether we actually continue this approach and put it into the form of a policy. That we set them up for equitable awards, but we can only award what they actually apply. If that makes sense. And then the other piece of this is the second half of the sentence is including the establishment of mandatory minimum percentages. We are already achieving that. That's done through the way that we set up the individual grant awards, because each city, each county already has, we've established the amount that they are eligible to receive without competing. They just have to submit an application. So we feel like we meet the second half of the requirement there, but we do kind of stress a little bit about whether or not we're meeting the equitable distribution requirement of the statute when it comes to the 5 CSP regions. So we would like to bring you a policy to vote on in November, but we'd like to ask, not just at today's meeting, but to contact us, but certainly in today's meeting, if there's any thoughts about how to approach this. This is the part where we're asking for your, but.
Is the problem seems to be in a manner that distributes funds equitably. Because whether distributed or not is dependent on a variable which you have no control. And then so maybe it should say something instead of distributes funds, makes awards or makes the availability of funds for distribution. So that it's available, where the process is equitable, because it's the same process for everybody versus the distribution or something.
And we're not, just for clarity, we're not proposing to change the statute. And there's lots of reasons why we don't think it's a good idea to open the statute up for changes. Because if you make one change, then there's lots of different interests out there. But it's more about freedom.
No. That was hard enough the first time.
I got you.
So I have a question. So the idea is to make sure no one looks at us thinking that we're not equally doing things, right? So if there was, we do all this teaching and educating, so the areas that are not asking for it, is it a time to send a human being into that area? Create a tribe right there, of what's going on with that person and an area to, To pull it
I'm
off.
trying to hire that.
Yeah, we got it. And we've done that successfully in the other regions.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, any more of that?
So my suggestion would be for everyone, if you have comments, if you don't want to bring them forward today, send those into the board, and send those into, to Tony, and then, you all come back to the November meeting with something, with a proposal, and then we'll adopt it as such. Yeah.
And I hate to say it, one of the problems, reason we're seeing so much participation from Region 3 is, well, it's twofold. First, there's need. But second of all, got an incredible personnel working. You just really do. I mean,
Who's we, and the advantage that Cindy has is she was the day one person, dude, and then everybody else is now going to have the same results with time, so you're a year ahead, basically.
but you built relationships
Absolutely.
throughout the region. I know in City of Roanoke, when we cut the ribbon on the road on Patterson, everyone knew Cindy. I was invisible, everyone knew Cindy.
And there's a point that the outreach workers can do, that do a lot, and Jenny, and I'll show you a slide in a little bit that will show you the work that Jenny and Kat have been able to do over the last year. But there is a point with some of these localities, we can lead them to the water. We cannot make them drink.
Right.
So that's kind of where we have come to this.
And I don't mean to disparage anyone, I just know who's in my area.
And so the written, the draft should probably reflect that, Charlie, to, that, you know, hey, we have these funds available, but we gotta actually.
And this is one where we're happy to draft a policy and bring back to the board, but we wanted to give you the benefit. We didn't want to do that without asking for you. This is an important, so maybe if we're not changing the code, I understand that. Make this awesome, it's interesting. Then it's just in our policy, make it in our policy that the OAA shall make the funds available for distribution in an equitable way. Whether people take advantage of it or not, it's up to them. You know, we're gonna comply with the law by saying we're gonna make it available. You know, in an equitable way. You know what I mean? And just have the wording like that, and then it's in our policy that we're complying with the law, even if the numbers don't show that it's being distributed.
We're also thinking about equity over 18 to 20 years, right? Too, which is gonna look different in the latter half of that.
All right, so, again, if you have any suggestions, then obviously you can have more time to think about this. And you can forward those on to Tony and the team, and they'll take those into consideration when drafting that policy. So, next on the agenda is the operations report, so Charlie, take it away.
Sure. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So quick general operations update, city and county awards and reporting. So all of the FY 24 city and county annual reports were determined to be either compliant or substantially compliant. Those are the highest two scores. The substantially compliant meaning you're doing everything right. There's a few things you need to tweak and improve. If you do so, then you'll be in a compliant status. So I believe in November when I reported, we had a few that were straggling based on a couple of issues, but we're going to work to get those things resolved. And going forward, that reporting will happen in the portal now, which will be some of the administrative work. Once we get done here, we have awards packages to send out for the FY 26 awards, but then right behind that, anybody that's carrying forward funds from one year to another, they have what we call carry forward true ups, which find out where did their expenses end up versus where they were estimated at the time the grants committee approved them, so we can adjust any delta there. And then their annual reports will be due in September. I mentioned this during the grants committee, but I wanted to mention it to the full board as well. For the last 2 years, our cycle for application dates has been October 1 to April 1 of each year. And in part because it gave us some downtime in between to process things, as well as a good window of time for localities to work on things. we're now, wanting to revise that to open much sooner in mid-August. And close a little sooner than we have it in mid-March to provide more time for cities and counties, to get programs together. Because in the middle of that, we've got the holidays, basically by mid-November till mid-January, there's kind of a lull in operations. And then if staff's involved in General Assembly, it kind of goes a little longer. But also when, localities are wanting to apply for these in-year individual distribution awards, if they can apply for that a little bit earlier, they have a better chance of getting the money, getting the project together, getting the money spent during the fiscal year. It'll also give staff another about 2 weeks or so for processing the back end. We had 118 applications this year. And just for this, the items that were presented today, I imagine if we stay on track and we get another person out there engaging localities that haven't been, we could be looking at 150 easily. And so some more time to process that and get things straight and whatnot will be useful for us. And also it gets it done before a lot of the localities are in their local budget finalization, which takes away some time. So, if there's any other updates, cities and county application cycle, we have proposed they'll be brought to the grants committee at their August 1st meeting. On the state agency reports and reporting, all one of the state agency annual reports were deemed to be compliant or substantially compliant. OAA is determining the steps for the non-compliant project, which may be worked into the negotiations for their renewal proposal for the next session. But the state agency request for proposals open March 17th, closed. That should be May, not Mary 27. And we received 43 projects, 30 renewals, 13 new projects from 18 agencies, including 2 universities, George Mason and Mary Washington. Past Mary Baldwin when they go, when we got here, which will be their first time applying to the OAA. Some quick stats on statewide grants information to date. Number has continued to move up with the number of applications or awarded projects that have included participation by 111 of the 133 service counties. Now, participation does not mean that they're doing anything but signing on to the project with a signature. There may not be any money going for it. There may not be any direct services that they're involved in, but there is at least some level of engagement with an application. Thus far, we have been able to recommend awards for 232 of 242 project applications that we have received. And now some of those are renewals, but that means some of them are going into their 3rd year award. Total city and county awards today, with today's grants, is around 79 million, and we'll have about 130 active city and county projects. The 118 that we came through today, plus some, there's 12 planning grants that are from various rounds we did in the first year or 2 that are finishing up somewhere in the next 12 months. State agency awards. So this year, over time, we've received proposals from 20 different agencies that have included 61 projects, including this current proposals. To date, we've 6 total 20 million, that obviously just include the ones that we've just got, and with 32 active projects included proposals. So over our 26-month period, which is January 19th, when we opened the very 2023, when we opened the very first opportunity for grants, through April 1st of this year, when this closed, we received 303 proposals or applications and awarded 176 projects of about $99 million. I didn't realize we'd done 303. But again, some of those are renewals of the project, but each year there's an assessment process that it goes through. We are currently at 65 OAA gold standard cities and counties, all listed out here. There are some, I would note, that are from our conversations, they are planning to still be, but they've applied for projects, but they have not needed to access the gold standard bucket of funding yet, because they've had enough individual. But when they get to that point, that they do plan to submit for it. Some of them, it's something that is they want to get their first feet under them before they go back to their, it shows some success with the funds before they go back to their governing bodies for that. And I noted this to the grants committee earlier as well. This time last year we had 37, we have 65. That's a 75% increase, largely driven by these 3 outreach people here. And now we have almost 50% of cities and counties participating across the state, continuing to drive to hopefully getting 100%. Did want to show a little look at the number. So this is by our OAA regions, not by DBHDS regions. You can see the number of gold standard localities per region on the left. And you see the headquarters is really small because that's staffed by us in Richmond. It's only 6 localities and 3 of them are. So that makes that, so I separately on the right and show you the percentage by region, which looks a little more equitable across. And you can see the western region, you know, has the most. And then the eastern headquarters are and northern are very close. And in that central region, they're the lowest level. So some updates on outreach. Ginny and Kat will be hitting their 1-year mark in about a week and a half, I believe, with this. Yeah, which is crazy and exciting all at the same time. And Cindy just passed 2 years in April 1st. So a lot of work done in that amount of time. I wanted each of them to do is just a quick highlight, which Cindy's being a little bit different from probably Jenny's and Kat's, to highlight a major success, whatever their most useful event was, and a takeaway or lesson learned. So Cindy.
Yeah, and mine probably will be a little different. And Charlie, you did such an awesome job with the summaries from all the Western region. Thank you, because that was a lot. So I'll just take the opportunity to say, just a shout out to the Western region cities and counties and their sub-recipients. There's a more for the cities and counties willingness to be the fiscal agent, the cooperative partners, and then their subs who are the boots on the ground. The money would just be set in an account. So really just kudos to them. It's my privilege to do what I do to help them get to the finish line, but without them, nobody's doing the work. It's just money. So I'll just give a shout out to them and this team. And those 2 ladies have been fantastic the past year. So excited to work with them.
Cindy did have a large hand kind of playing role of senior outreach coordinator to Jenny and Kat to help me with the training as they first came on board. So, but it's something we get a lot of thanks and kudos for the work that we do here. But all we are is the conduit to get the money out of it. We don't have the partnerships by the cities and counties and especially their sub-recipients on the ground. Nobody's getting the benefit of what these funds were intended.
So I guess major success from a perspective of outreach, I have met with 100% of my 35 localities, whether they utilize funds or not. You know, but that small group, I think it was probably 2 weeks before the application deadline of April 1st, several of them came and were like, hey, we have ideas. And it wasn't just one person and they gathered the team. So they're in the background, they're wanting to do stuff. So I think that that's a success when you plant the seed in the beginning and then 6 months later and so on and so forth. So hopefully by the next cycle, they'll have something going. And I think the 2 main, the conferences were our workshops because they really wanted to come get information, and then VACO. Because engaging with board members got them talking to their people going, hey, so-and-so told me, and then they reached out to us that way. But the side surprising time is the super, I call them facilitators in different areas that are taking on the role of helping with these abatement issues. Like over in Gloucester, it's Stephen Wright. He's conducting more than his area meetings and things like that. But there's several across my region that are doing that. So that was a big help in connecting me with those folks that weren't talking with me. And what was the other one? The things I learned, I guess, everybody really wants to do something, but capacity, staffing are their challenges. So being the person that's a resource to connect them to other projects, other people has been super helpful. At least that's the communication I've got. So yeah.
That's fine.
Yes, you should have seen these ladies hunting down localities, the association of counties, either county administrators, city manager, board members, looking for their name tags. Oh, I haven't talked about them.
Yeah.
We'd be spotting them for each other and can they look over my other shoulder? So great. Walk over and talk with, so Vaco getting us a table up there and getting us involved in that was really helpful this year.
Yeah.
It was a spectacular partnership.
All right, a lot of what I have to say echoes both Jenny and Cindy, but really. For major successes in the region, it really has to do with the outreach to all the localities and the response that I received from basically every locality that is in the northern region and their communication back and forth with me and their engagement. And just watching it increase over the last year to now being prior to our new application period opening and people already being engaged and talking about new applications and ideas that they have for the next fiscal year and the next round of applications. For the most useful meetings, I would say it was the abatement academies, because for me and myself, I was learning the job at the same time as trying to do it. So it's really the abatement academies really helped me understand the process, what we were trying to achieve, and then also meeting and learning from different partners and organizations. And then my key takeaway, it's really just how engaged our entire team is and how engaged the OAA is and how amazing it is to work with such a fantastic team of people.
Yes, and Kat's even made a trip all the way out to Highland County, which is the smallest, I think, locality by population in the Commonwealth, and had meetings with some of their staff, right at a time where they had some very recent and slightly turbulent turnover. And so they haven't gotten onto a grant yet, but they have engaged, and so that was a nice little win when she got it, so. So, Sharika is, not here, today, but she just completed her, 1 year, a little less than a month ago with us. And I think Tony praised her, like, as we say, Sharika's out, there 3 people down. And it's true, and I said it as a joke to Tony the other day, but everybody's been repeating, and it's like, that's how we all feel. She does so much, and in her first 2 weeks on, she was already administering stuff with state grants because she picked stuff up so quickly. So I just wanted to highlight, especially because she's not here to tell me to be quiet. Her work ethic, production, and her team support. And not only does she support this team here, but she's another piece of the outreach. We get into a heavy technical budget thing that she's brought in, and she's working with the outreach workers with the localities. Sometimes it's her, the finance director of the locality, trying to hash through and figure out what needs to be straightened out and stuff. So having another arm that can sit in both areas has been super helpful. And it allows me to go to sleep at night. Because when she's not here, she's not there for the last 3 weeks, I don't sleep as much because I have to do her job, which when I had 47 projects in year 1, that wasn't too bad. 130 is a different situation, but so she's great for us and for our customers. And she also did a book, which she has termed a red flag review with every application that came in, where she goes in and looks through them and looks for possible, some of it's like the low level administrative things, you compare a number or you look for something that's not matching. So when those of us that were reviewing grants got there, we already had a bit of a roadmap of some of the problems that needed to be fixed, which allowed us to really focus on the evidence-based practices, the timeline, the outcomes, performance measures, and those things that sometimes we haven't had as much time as we would have liked because we're fixing some small little budget issue, can't seem to get the penny to round off or something. So, and she had made it a note to all of us that just by looking through those applications, she said it was very apparent to look at an application that had worked with the resource coordinators to develop it and those that have just done it cold with them. And there's very obvious benefits that they're providing to the quality of this project. So also want to mention our OAA news update, our newsletter, which our first one went out in March of 2023, and we sent 55 out, 1,402 active subscribers. Over the last 365 days, we're still sitting at a 55% open rate and only a 0.09 unsubscribe rate. And most of that is usually people changing jobs. It's Sharika or I getting bounce back emails saying, this person's no longer here. and we're pulling those out, so, that is still be a major way for us to do it, and we do get a lot of feedback from people that, pull information out there. So in, this slide here shows just the total number of applications, received with the increase from 2024 to 2025, by, by the TBHDS region. So that kind of strikes, I didn't have the data by OAA region, unfortunately, to put together. But so as you can see at the bottom of each chart, region 1 has jumped up 22% over last year, and that is part cat and part Cindy. The northern region is all cat. It's only had a 40% jump, even though it's only a couple of applications. As I mentioned to the grants committee, the big project that Fairfax County has for their youth residential treatment facility, all the localities in that region agree that this is our primary focus. So region 3, you'll see surprisingly a little drop over the previous year. However, Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, last year we had to recommend a number of applications to not be funded.
Yeah.
And that had to do with, some of it was the quality of the application, some of it was a lack of partnerships. These things were just, there was a lot of money for not a lot of localities being impacted, only 2 partners, no matching funds and stuff, and we communicated that to applicants. So while we see less applications, the quality is much higher, because there were no applications we didn't recommend for, that we recommended to be denied this year. Region 4 is the central part of the state. That's Jenny has a part of that, and then our headquarters in our central region. So even without the representative, we've had some jump there. But you can see in region 5, Jenny was able to help facilitate a 61% jump from 2024 to 2025 in applications. And almost every one of her applications, they were engaging with her. I don't think we got anything really cold out of your region, so. And early too, some of the Virginia Beach Recovery High School project, we were talking about with them in November. So. But we still have 22 cities or counties that have not participated in any way, shape, or form, and 25% of those are in the OAA's central region, and especially across the kind of southern central part of the state, kind of south of Charlottesville down to the border. And so last thing for me to cover is the implementation of our grants portal. So, Tony's talked about a lot of the stuff for that. So, some of the big benefits not having to maintain. Not only do we have to process and go through all these manual papers and things when they come through, we also have to develop them and maintain them and make sure they work correctly and update them when they don't and that kind of thing. So that's kind of a 2-for-1 swing that we get by having to have all this stuff running through the system. We also no longer have to generate an award package or MOU for every award. The system is going to do that for us. Otherwise, we would be going back and writing out 118 award packages. And after August, we'd be generating potentially 18 MOUs to cover, and each project gets its own 43 appendices to go with this. All that's going to come together out of the system with all the proper legal documentation, and the signing, reviewing all also happen through the system. So, and there's a significant reduction in our errors, because there was a lot of not only maintaining manual spreadsheets, we're hand keying things across different ones. Sometimes for time, sometimes because it doesn't import correctly. So the more we're trying to shift more and more into just pulling those numbers out of the system. We could, probably one of the biggest things we can do, as soon as they start an application, we can see it in the system. And we can get on the phone with them, pull up screens, and we can look at exactly what they're looking at the same time. And that has really helped. Carol's been on with a call or two with us. We've been working through the Fairfax project and trying to get the numbers right, and we hold things up and we look at it and we go, oh, this right here needs to be like this, and this right here needs to be like that. And that's really made it easier for us to provide better support to them. Another thing is any of the applications and reports that have to be signed by city and county executives, as well as state agencies, it all happens through an email. You have access to email, you can sign. You get an email, which takes you to an Adobe site. Put in your signature, you see everything that you're signing. and you're done. They don't have to log into the system to do that. Additionally, when they're doing a renewal, or you don't have to enter previous year awards, Sharika and Matt entered all of the historical data for everybody. So even the paper applications information is in there, and so going forward, they only have to talk about what their new information is. And last on that, the portal will not let a city or county request more individual or standard funds than it currently has available, so it knows how much is being allocated across different applications. That is unless they try to go somewhere else and request it as one of them. But we can do really that. And I want to note a couple of early lessons learned. Many cities, we've got a lot of good feedback on the application. Not only from like local staff, but I was working with a couple of assistant county administrators who forgot they needed a renewal done and had to jump in and figure it out last minute. And, you know, even with me having to apologize for something not working quite right, they were like, no, the system is very intuitive. I was able to very easily follow it. It made a lot of sense. And they appreciated the work we put into the design. There's still some more tweaks we can do to make it a little bit better. But we've got a lot of good feedback. The other side of it is no matter how many guidance documents, training and support webinars you make available, there's just some people that aren't gonna wait, they're gonna jump in and then things aren't gonna work and you're gonna have to jump in and help them. So that's part of our job security, I guess, in a better way, but. And I think that probably the biggest thing that tripped us up this year is we tried not to put too much stuff on the screen to make it hard to read, but we've got to open up some of our financial documents so that they're able to enter the things that the way we require them to keep them. So, you know, each kind of, you've got gold standard and you've got individual and you've got cooperative and then you've got your directs. They're all like 4 different revenue sources that all have to be tracked separately. So we need to break that down and make it a little easier for them to enter their data. So it becomes the way it is. And that's one of the things we'll be working on starting in a couple of weeks. That concludes my report.
Any questions for Charlie? Okay. The next item on the agenda is public comment, and this is the time of the agenda when we invite members of the public to address the board. We ask the speakers limit their comments to 3 minutes. We will begin with anyone who is in person and then open the floor to anyone joining us virtually. For individuals online, please click the raise hand feature if you would like to be acknowledged. I mean, do we have any speakers? Under 5.
We have an individual.
All right, welcome. Let's come up to the front, so everyone. Yeah, sure. Just introduce yourself and welcome.
Absolutely. I wasn't planning on making a comment, but I was compelled to. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Sean Parker. I represent New Season. We are a leader in opioid addiction treatment. We operate 3 opioid treatment centers in the Commonwealth of Virginia, Harrisonburg and 2 in Richmond, serving just over 1,700 patients currently, with a 4th location coming in the end of this year, the beginning of next year. The Commonwealth's opioid settlement MOU does not have any language in it that would preclude for-profit agencies from applying or being a participant in any of the RFPs. However, there are municipalities in the Commonwealth that do preclude for-profit entities from applying for their direct RFPs or even engaging in collaborative efforts. Given the scale of the opioid epidemic and the pressing need for accessible, high-quality treatment, this exclusion poses a significant barrier. For-profit agencies like those operated by New Season are on the front lines of this crisis every day, providing essential services that save lives and support long-term recovery. Excluding these providers from financial support undermines our collective response to one of the most urgent public health challenges of our time. I am urging this board to issue a statement or a policy to the municipalities to open future opportunities for all licensed providers, regardless of tax status, allowing for-profit providers to apply for and receive opioid settlement funds would more accurately reflect the treatment landscape and help ensure the resources are directed where they need. And I cannot speak intelligently for other for-profit providers, but for us, we do not utilize settlement funds to bolster our bottom line.
we utilize these funds to remove barriers for our patients. Whether it is partnering with Uber Health to provide transportation to get patients to appointments or to get treatment, providing recovery services and materials like lock boxes, or doing harm reduction vending machines where the patients have access to Narcan, fentanyl test strips, charcoal bags, etc. So thank you for the time to speak to you and your consideration to my request.
Thank you for your comments and thank you for what you do for Commonwealth. Anyone else that signed up? Physically and anybody online?
No.
So seeing that there's nobody online or anyone else here, we'll go to the next agenda item. That's new business. So the resignation of Mr. Jim Holland from the board created a vacancy of treasurer, position of treasurer. Accordingly, I'm requesting nominations for a board member to fill the role as treasurer. Any member of the board can nominate himself or another member for any of this position. I encourage participation from all board members. The nomination does not require a second. However, any number of persons may second a nomination just to show their support of that nominee. With that, I'd like to ask Tony to initiate the nomination process for the office of treasurer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will now open the floor for any nominations for the position of treasurer.
I'd like to nominate Delegate Sewell, Brianna Sewell.
We have a nomination for Delegate Brianna Sewell.
Second.
In support, I'll even third.
All right, we have a second and another second. Any other nominations on the floor for the position of treasurer? Hearing none, all in favor of electing Brianna Sewell as treasurer, the OAA say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and I don't know if Brianna is online now or not, but we will certainly inform her of her new role.
She had this.
She went to the bathroom.
Maybe she
Gotta show up. The second item of new business is an announcement for myself as chair. With the recent changes of the board, we have openings on the grants committee and the finance committee. If there are any members of the board who would like to be considered for an appointment to one of these committees, please let Tony, you or myself know in the next few weeks. Because we need to make those appointments in July to fill those open seats. If there are any board members already serving on a committee who for any reason, and I don't know why they would want to not serve, but need to step back from that role, please let Tony or myself know that as well. There's no action required on that item today, just we appreciate your consideration of filling those roles. The third item of new business is to consider amendment to the organizational bylaws. A copy of that proposed amendment is attached to your agenda labeled attachment 1. Tony, could you please take us through that item?
Yes, so this is, I mentioned this during my report. This is the item that would streamline or clarify that there is no appeals process for competitive grants. If a member appeals, compelled to make a draft motion on the screen.
I'll make that motion. Approve the proposed amendment, to the OAA bylaws to provide. That's the attachment 1 on the agenda explains.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Good. We have a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next on the agenda is new business item D. The fourth item of new business, consider an amendment to our policy about electronic meetings. State code requires the board to adopt this policy each year. Recently, there's been a change in statute that provides some additional flexibility as it relates to conducting virtual meetings. A copy of that proposed annual policy is attached to your agenda label. Attachment 2, Tony is going to take us through that.
The only change that the General Assembly made is that it allows any individual member of, so in this case of the OAA board, who's participating remotely due to a temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition that prevents their physical attendance, either for themselves or for a family member, they can participate electronically and but it would count as if they were physically present. That's the change. In addition, this is a policy that has to be approved by the board each year.
I'll make the motion.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Next on new business is the fifth item. To consider an amendment to our policy of how staff and grant recipients manage individual grant budgets. Copy of both policies attached. Your agenda and labeled attachment 3. Tony will walk us through it.
Yes, so the policy is attached on your agenda, it's page 6 of 7. This basically gives the staff, the executive director, the ability to work with our grant recipients to make cost neutral budget changes and to true up the carryover from the amount that they projected to what actually occurred. And we've been coming back to the grants committee each time this happens. This would basically let the staff make these adjustments, and the draft motion is provided on the screen.
I'll make the motion.
I have a motion, I have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next on the agenda is item F. It's to consider authorization to upgrade a part-time position to full-time. Tony's talked about this already, about the treating a full-time position in the central portion of Commonwealth, because we've had trouble filling just a part-time position. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
A second? So the motion, a second, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Next, we'll consider authorization of the executive director for your professional services related to communications and public relations. Tony's walked us through that already. We have a motion.
I'll so moved.
A motion, do we have a second? We have a motion, a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Next, we'll consider authorization for an executive director for pure professional services related services. I think Tony's already talked about that. We have a motion.
So moved.
We have a second. We have a motion, a second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed related to trademark protections? All in favor, we have a motion.
I'll make the motion.
We have a second. Second, we have a motion and second, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That motion carries. Next business item J, we'll consider authorization as executive director to bring forward. I'm getting a lot of power here. Next, we consider authorization as executive director to bring forward the finance committee, a contract between the OAA and the newly formed opioid abatement foundation. Tony's already provided us with the background that request that we have a motion.
I'll make the motion.
We have a second. Second. We have a motion, a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. Final item of business, the board is consider approval of the FY 26 OAA annual budget, which was presented by Adam. A copy of the proposed budget is attached to your agenda and labeled attachment 4. Do we have the motion?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second? Second. We have a motion and a second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries. So at this time, I would like to welcome Ms. Ritter to the board. I know Governor Youngkin has placed this faith in you as well as the city of Chesapeake, and we're certainly looking forward to working with you.
Thank you.
But with that, unfortunately, no, you're here, no, you're in no position yet. But with that, we have to, also, we were saying goodbye to one of our founding members of this, and that's Ms. Sharon Buckman. And Sharon's been with us since the get-go, since 2021. And she served on the grants committee. She's made presentations on behalf of the OAA, at training events, and she's provided invaluable leadership to the board and advice to the staff. So Ms. Buckman has accepted an administrative position now rather than a clinical position with her, with the CSB that she works with. So we are going to miss her. But that does not go unnoted, and we want to make sure that we give you something to hang on your wall to remember us by. Thank you very much. So on behalf of the OAA, thank you for your service. All right. That's what I thought. So with that, I think a motion. Sure.
I'll make the motion.
You're involved.
We have a motion second here now.